Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers with you, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. Mercury has stationed direct. That is right, my friends. It is moving forward. That it is now moving through the shadow. Okay. That's not a scary thing. We'll talk a little bit about that here on the podcast. It is a bumpy ride this week. I'm not going to lie. I talked about that a lot, though. I talked about it throughout 2022. I talked about it in the year ahead twice last year. So if you have the 2023 year ahead, you know I talked about this. It's been something of a concern to me for a year. And I'm kind of tired of talking about it. So I'll talk about Mercury and what it means for it to be in direct motion and what it means to go through the shadow phase. But what I really want to talk about on this episode 22, one of my favorite numbers, episode 22 of season 3, we're going to talk about the new moon in Taurus, because it is a very bright and shiny silver lining in what looks to be a very volatile week. And I think it's going to be a lot of political volatility, economic volatility. There's just volatility all over the place. And so what you're going to see or hear on this podcast is some hope and that ray of sunshine that we've got in the new moon in Taurus. So we're going to talk about that. So let's see. We're talking about Mercury and what it means to be direct. We're going to talk about the new moon. I'm going to give you some hope to listen to, because I don't think you really want to listen to me cringe about this week. I already talked about how you can make the best use of it. I think we're going to look at all the different activities we're going to be doing. I've got some news to catch you guys up with. There's some of that. We'll do that during Patron Shoutouts, because and don't skip them if you're a listener. I'm not just trying to get you to join my Patreon. I get it if you don't want to be a patron. But our patrons sponsor the podcast, and so there's juicy information inside that section. I often leave little tidbits in there, little Easter eggs, so you want to not skip that part of the podcast. We'll, of course, do astrology Q&A, but we're not doing an astro chat this week here on the podcast. We are, however, doing a very special broadcast for patrons only on May 16th in Patreon using riverside.fm. We're going to do a call-in show, which is super fun for any of the mods that work with me or the astrologers. We're going to come in, we're going to chit chat, we're going to have some fun, we're going to blow off some steam. We might take some jello shots. Nope, kidding. Well, I don't know. Maybe somebody will. I don't know. But we're going to just make it fun and take calls from patrons. And I'm really, really excited about that. And then I'm going to answer here on the podcast. I'll answer some astrology Q&A, because that is awesome. And probably during that give some astrological information I think people need to know, because there's so much misinformation. And I hear people kind of regurgitate, and you don't know what you don't know. Okay. And people, I think, don't realize that astrology is a field of study. It is a multidisciplinary field of study. It's not just a party trick. It's not just, a glib thing or like a personality sorter. It's not. It's an ancient multidisciplinary field of study. Notice I didn't say science, because there's too much room for interpretation, but there are scientific aspects to it. Okay, like the math, and there's elements. Okay, but I'll say, it's about as scientific as economics, only it's more accurate. Oh, thanks, burn. But anyway, so there's a lot up on deck this week. I want to focus on the positive, because that's what it's going to take to get through this week in any way, shape, or form. So Hold on to your hats, folks. Let's look at the silver linings together. Grab your coffee, get your hands on the wheel for the commute, get the laundry or the dishes going. I'm here to help you get through your tasks for the day. Or if you're stuck at a desk typing away, I'm here to distract you. Let's get going. Let's start with the silver linings for this week. All right. We're going to start with the silver linings. I think that's the most important thing we can do. Because how we focus our energy from now until the new moon is really important. And it doesn't mean pretend everything's okay if it's not. It doesn't mean ignore a tense reality. But what we need to do is focus on the objective, because this new moon can help kickstart off a project that is ready to hit the ground. Okay, so this isn't the type of new moon where we're setting intentions for a faraway future, a 5 to 10 year matter, okay, or even a year or two out. This is a project that you've been working on, or something in your life you've been actively and probably frustratedly working on for quite some time, and now it's ready to kick over and become a reality. So the moon is at 2853 of Taurus. That is the maturity of Taurus. It is, Taurus is one of the life-giving signs. It's, you put the seed in the ground and it germinates and it grows, and Cancer tends that. Well, Mars is in Cancer, and Mars is always action. Don't let anyone tell you that Mars in Cancer doesn't take action. It does. It just isn't direct, okay? It's tenacious. It's steady. Well, it ebbs and flows, but it still makes an impact. If you look at how the tide ebbs and flows off a shoreline, it wears it down. Well, it doesn't do that because it gives up, does it? No, right? So you've got this project, this baby is ready to pop. This it could be artwork, it could be a restaurant, it could be some kind of real estate deal, it could be a business idea or a project. I've got a couple that I've been working on for quite some time, and in fact I was trying to stagger them. You know how that goes. All the best plans, right? Well, they're all coming to needing to start their next phase, whatever that phase is, all at the same time. That is this new moon energy. Now, it's interesting because as this new moon is in a very supportive aspect with Mars, it's in a sextile with Mars in Cancer. This is do it now energy. And yet it's going to look like the whole freaking world is falling apart. Yeah. And that is where you have to hold steady and kind of tune out the noise. I'm not saying take scary risks. I'm not saying do something dumb. I'm not saying go all in if you don't have anything in reserve. I am saying don't stop because it feels scary. Okay. Because things feel scary when we grow. Sometimes we're so willing to stay in an uncomfortable, bad situation because of the unknowingness of what the next step is. Whether the best way to describe this is you may very much want to leave home as a young person and you graduate high school and you're excited to go to college. But man, when you're taking off for college, it's scary as hell. And you think, am I doing the right thing? It could be you have a change in a relationship, right? And the relationship might be wholly dysfunctional, but you've put time, you've invested time and energy into it. And you think, oh my God, why would I want to waste all that time I put into it? Right. When in actual fact, been wasting time on your son, not giving it to yourself. But that unknowingness can kind of freak us out. And so this is a time to hold steady. You've put in the time, you've put in the work. This is not a surprise. It is not a brand new idea. This is something you've been working on or wanting to do for a really long time. Now it's time to do more than make a wish. This isn't make a wish energy. This is make a rock solid plan with proven steps. Okay. Other people have probably gone before you. You want to use the footsteps in front of you. This is a well-worn path. Okay. You might have a cool idea that's a refresh of something. Most times when we think we're doing something no one's ever done before, it's probably not something no one's ever done before. We just didn't know that there's other people doing it. Okay. There's always a model. So even if it might be a subject that something hasn't been done in before, there's a model, a business model, a project model, an outline. Okay. So you want to be working on a solid plan that has kind of a precedent. Okay. You're not setting the precedent. You're walking a well-worn path. And it can still be scary. Do it anyway. You want to keep fear to a minimum because fear is going to be your biggest obstacle this week. And I can guarantee you the media is going to be whipping it up, just whipping it up. There's going to be some doozies out there. And there's going to be natural events. There's going to be probably some violence. I talked about it last week. I don't want to talk about it this week. I really want to focus on the good stuff. So if you want to know what kind of a shit show it's going to be next week, listen to the last episode if you haven't already, or listen to it first, refresh. Where you want to put your focus is on this new moon, and it's good for everybody. It's good for everybody. This is universally good for everybody. Where it will be good for you specifically is where you find Taurus, the late degrees, okay? The late degrees of Taurus and Cancer. All right, because that is exact. So if you have a Taurus rising with the late degrees of Taurus in the first house, Cancer rising, late degrees of Cancer in the first house. If you have the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars in Cancer, this really, really benefits you, or Taurus in those later degrees. So don't come at me and go, my sun's at 0 degrees Cancer. I'll be like, that's great. Jupiter will be in a sextile to that, and that's really nice. It has nothing to do with the new moon. Degrees matter. There are 30 degrees in a sign from 0 to 29. Okay? We could make it a song. There are 30 degrees in a zodiac sign from 0 to 29. Right? Can we do that? All right. So those degrees don't have a meaning inherently except for 0 and 29. That's 0 holds all the potential. 29 holds the maturity. Okay, that's it. 15 shows middle ground. Degree theory is not a real thing. Okay, I will die on that hill. It's superstitious nonsense. We use degrees navigationally. Okay, look at your GPS. It'll say X degree north, something degree west. It's directional. Okay, and it is in your astrology chart as well. If you watch my YouTube video walkthrough on the chart, on the natal chart, that'll explain some of that to you, visually, because it's kind of hard to do it verbally. Like you can't see anything. So if you want a visual walkthrough, go to my YouTube channel. I'll link it in the show notes. So Cancer and Taurus get some big bennies out of this. So does Pisces. Okay. Pisces gets a benny, Scorpio gets a benny, Virgo gets a benny, Capricorn gets a benny. Those guys, they all do well at the later degrees. It isn't that the other signs don't get benefit. It's just, these guys get the most bang for their buck. Don't feel left out, because even if you don't have placements, you still have positions in your chart at the late degrees of Taurus and Cancer in the houses. But Laurie, my houses are empty. There is no such thing as an empty house. It is apparently empty. It means it only looks empty. There's energy there. Please don't argue with me about it. I get so tired of people arguing with me. I'll be like, hey, I've been doing this a long time. And someone's like, yeah, well, I just started, but this is what I heard. I'm like, that's great. I've been doing this for 3 decades. You can keep arguing. Just don't. Okay. It only looks empty. We're going to go through some of that in Natal Chart Foundations. That starts May 20th. If you haven't signed up for Natal Chart Foundations and you've been wanting to, your chance is here. Your chance is here. So we start May 20th. And then intermediate astrology starts on the 14th. I'm super excited about that. Super excited. If you applied to be part of that, by the way, if you applied to be part of that, I sent the emails out. So if you missed it because it was Mother's Day, go back and check your inbox. So not everybody who applied got into it. Some people were referred back to Natal Chart Foundations. It doesn't mean I don't like you, and it doesn't mean I don't think you'll be good. It just means you need a more solid foundation to really rock it through the class in intermediate, because we're going to start getting a little tougher on the astrology as we move forward, and I want people to do that with confidence. So back to the new moon. The new moon has a lot of potential. The new moon has a lot of potential to get moving, but you've got to take action. Okay. You cannot just sit around saying affirmations, listening to solfeggio sounds or binaural beats. But I'm listening to the manifestation tone. That's great. You still have to take action. There isn't a spiritual teacher on the planet who would tell you anything else. You gain clarity, you align to the vision, the dream, the hope, the aspiration, and that alignment then causes action that is in alignment with the vision. Okay. And that can be weird. It doesn't mean that you're just, there's only one way to make this happen. It could be you get this impulse to go to the corner store where somebody says, oh, hey, nice shirt. Did you know about this app? And you didn't need to know about that app, but that makes you think about another app, and you start doing research. Next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole that starts you a business. Okay. That aligned action can lead to many strange happenings. This is probably going to be more steady, more proven, more direct than that. You may get just a bug in your ear to just go do some research online. You might talk to a friend and get the advice you needed. You might finally take some action. It'll probably be financial too. Okay. I know it will be for me. And I find that really, really fascinating, because it's just where this is all falling in my chart. It's very fascinating to see where we go next. And I can't talk about any of it because it's too early in the process. But whereas I thought I might have to go look for investment capital, I may have been able to source the funding myself. And if you would have told me 6 years ago I would have been able to do that, well, I would have thought you were nuts. I would have been like, you're nuts. And so I'm really, really proud of all the hard work that's come to get us to this space. And that's something you want to, give yourself a pat on the back, because that's something to do with this new moon. This is not something new. It is a next step in making something real. It's part of the birthing process. So just like you got a baby in the belly, and even if you haven't had a baby in the belly, let's just suppose there's a baby in the belly and it's ready to come out. Well, we call it a newborn because it is newly born into the physical world, but it, in actual fact, was growing inside of a physical environment for 10 months. Yeah, it ain't 9 months. It's 40 weeks. I don't know how anyone thought it's probably that first month, because real people who aren't crazy people know that the first 4 to 8 weeks of a pregnancy, the odds of blighted ovum and other rejected issues of the body and spontaneous abortion, which is what a miscarriage is called medically. Look it up. Encyclopedia. Sorry. But anyway, so a newborn is called a newborn because it is birthed into the physical world, taking a breath on its own. Okay, that's what causes life, is first breath. The Greeks and Babylonians thought so too. So did the Canaanites, so did the Hebrews, so did the Jewish people, so did many indigenous people. It's only in modern times that people have a problem with that. So these are projects that are ready to leave the incubator and be birthed into the world. Now, they still need tending, thus Mars and Cancer. They still need tending. They need guardianship. Okay, they're not ready to fly all the way on their own, these projects. Okay, and it could be a project at work, it could be a real estate deal, it could be an art project, it could be a book, it could be whatever you've been working on, whatever is your baby, whatever you hold in high esteem. It could be a financial deal, it could be a product, it could be anything. It depends on your experience. We're talking about that container-like energy we're dealing with here, and it is being birthed. Okay? So there might be some labor pains in the early part of the week. Those can be healing. We've been taught in the Western world to shy away from pain. And understand that pain can be part of the healing process. And so if old worries, doubts, past experiences, past failures are up on deck and you're feeling the stress of it, and hey, I get it, me too. Okay, I'm about to take what kind of feels like a scary big step, but it's honestly, as I get closer to it, it doesn't feel as big as it did last week. And it doesn't feel anywhere close to as big as it felt 10 years ago. It can feel really scary. But the fact of the matter is, it's an illusion, this idea of distance and hard and easy. It's about focus and just taking the next step. You don't have to get to the finish line on this. You just have to actively take the next step. And there's going to be stuff that comes up for release. Remember, we always get a little crunchy right before we make things happen. Okay, right before that new moon, there's emotional release because you're making room to plant the seeds for the next step. And these are already sprouted seeds. You went and got a pony pack of marigolds to plant. Okay, you're not planting little teeny tiny seeds. You've got seedlings that have buds on them, and you're putting those in the garden. So that's what the new moon has to bring. I'll talk about it more in Patreon, and we'll talk about it on Tuesday as well, because we're all going to need some good news by 4 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday. If you want to participate, you can join the Patreon, and it starts at $5. $5 a month. Sponsors the podcast, gets you crunch reports, and you get to join in some fun live action, which is super cool. Horoscopes start at 15, and they're specific and guide you through. We've got the new format now. We did our third week of the live streams because of Mercury retrograde, actually, where I just could not hit that deadline for Love or Money. And so we did the live stream for the Scorpio full moon to make up for it, because I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to get these written. Everything is getting in my way. This Mercury retrograde was kicking my hiney. And actually, I really, really like doing them that way because it's a lot more interactive. And on my live stream software, I can read people's comments, we can interact, make it more personal. And now we have chapters. And so it's easier to find your stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. And, again, and if people don't like it, I don't know because they haven't told me. So I always find it kind of funny when people kind of come and go out of the Patreon because they don't always say, what's going on and what they have a problem with, or I'm like, okay, if you don't tell me, I can't fix it. So, and I'm pretty responsive about getting things fixed if I can fix them. If it's not a me problem, I can't fix it. So that's why I'll say, well, that's a Wix problem or that's a Patreon problem. I don't do the code on those, but I can put in a ticket, a tech ticket. So anyway, but likewise, if there's something you really like and you want me to keep doing, you got to let me know about that too, because I don't know without feedback. I don't know. Feedback's important. Mercury is direct. We're going to talk about that up next. Let's talk about Mercury direct and give you a little astrology lesson. I think that'll help so you understand what the retrograde stuff all is and you stop freaking yourself out about Mercury moving through the shadow. Gather round, children. Let's talk about astrology basics. We're going to talk about what a retrograde period is. Okay, so planets actually never go retrograde in reality. Okay, that means they never are moving backwards in the sky. But we live on planet Earth, and our perceptions shape our reality. And from our point of view on Earth, a geocentric point of view, when we look up in the sky, there are certain times when we're observing celestial bodies, not the sun or the moon. They never appear to go backwards. But the others, the planets, often do. And I say often. Everybody acts like it's a big surprise. Mercury normally has a 3-week retrograde period about 3 times a year. When they say it's been 4 times, like last year, it was like the last 2 days of the year. Okay, because remember, our calendars are arbitrary. There is no one calendar that is the accuratest or the most accurate. It's really late. As you know, I record this very late at night on Sunday or early hours Monday. We're well past midnight at this point, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, our calendars are arbitrary because time really doesn't exist, except it does exist for us in physical bodies. So a lot like retrogrades, time is an illusion, but it's an illusion we live with. So planets move in direct motion. They station, okay, and then they retrograde. They station and they move direct. There's a little more to that cycle. Some people erroneously call the time period before Mercury retrogrades the pre-shadow. That is an impossibility on so many levels. It is pre-retrograde. It is not the pre-shadow. Okay. It's not the pre-shadow. It's the pre-retrograde. This is why scientists make fun of us and bully us, guys. Let's not be lax. Okay. You cannot have a pre-shadow. You do not walk outside in the morning and you leave your front door and go out, and if the sun is shining, look down at the pavement and go, well, my shadow isn't there yet, but it's going to be. I'm in my pre-shadow phase. No, there's no shadow. Okay, you're walking forward. So what the pre-retrograde phase is it appears that the planet is slowing down to our perceptions. Then it stations. That means it looks like it stopped. And then it will change direction. It'll appear to go retrograde. Okay. And that means it looks like it's moving backwards, and it does that for about 3 weeks. Then it stations, okay? Then it moves direct, and it goes through the shadow of the retrograde. It is not a bad omen. It's not like in Harry Potter and they see the grim, okay? It just means it's going back through the place it retrograded. So it's going through the shadow of the retrograde. And it just means you're still dealing with issues that you were dealing with before Mercury went retrograde, during the retrograde, and you're winding them up during the shadow, okay? Which takes another 2.5, almost 3 weeks. Then it's moving on its own direct out, and it's just doing its thing. Speaking of retrograde, Saturn spends 5 months out of the year retrograde, okay? The outer planets all spend almost half of their time retrograde. Again, the sun and the moon do not appear to go retrograde. All right. Jupiter goes retrograde a fair amount. Venus goes retrograde about every other year. Same with Mars. Okay, every 2 years, right? So Venus is going retrograde this summer, but I'm not going to talk about that now. I just putting a bug in your ear. I'll do a whole episode about Venus and Leo going retrograde. We have so many fish to fry, we don't need to talk about it. So the parts of the retrograde are pre-retrograde, where Mercury slows down. We're just talking about Mercury retrograde itself. Pre-retrograde, Mercury appears to slow down. The station, okay, when it looks like it's stopping, then it moves into retrograde motion for about 3 weeks. It stations again at the end of that, moves direct. It's in direct motion then, and it moves through the shadow, okay, for about 3 weeks. And that's the retrograde cycle. All of the retrogrades do that. What about the nodes? The nodes aren't planets. The nodes are calculation points. They're mathematical points. They're not celestial bodies in the sky. And I think people put way too much emphasis on them. Okay, way too much emphasis on them. If you need to focus on the celestial bodies first. Okay, I know you want to be all mystical and get all this ancient wisdom, and I get it. I started my journey with some similar thoughts in certain areas, but astrology is so much deeper and broader and liberating when you actually get into the real deal. And speaking of the real deal, a lot of people are coming into my comments and my lives saying my Jupiter's in Taurus, and so my return is starting. A return does not happen until the planet or the celestial body or the calculation point has returned to the degree and minute it is in the birth chart. Now you can translate what I did in this Saturn return video I did on YouTube to explain that, because people will think they're in a Saturn return for the whole of a Saturn transit, and that is not what happens. Okay, I know there are people who claim to be Hellenist astrologers out there who say, oh no, the Greeks didn't bother about the aspect, so it's the whole time. That is not all the way true. It is also an erroneous way of thinking. You're right, the Greeks did not put emphasis, nor did the Babylonians or the Romans. They did not put emphasis on returns because they didn't have the math to do it. Okay? We didn't use zero actively in mathematical equations until the 11th century. Right? Math matters, and it matters in spiritual pursuits too. It's not separate. Our conscious expansion is something that is married between our left and our right brains, okay? Which, by the way, neuroscience proves there's no such thing as left brain, right brain thinking. Art involves science and math. Music involves science and math. Whether you're cognitive of the science and math involved, it's still there. It's still there. When I was a little girl, and I mean really little, I taught myself how to play a keyboard. There were music books that came with this keyboard. And what I did is I numbered the notes and I equated them to the keys. Yes, I have perfect pitch. But to me, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 as a kid, right? And I think I read a little bit about it in one of the other books. It numbered them instead of using letters. Letters seemed confusing when it came to the keys because they were in a row and that seemed more numerical. Math and physics are part of what we use to understand the world. Astrology is a notation system that translates our understanding of energy, and we assign each one of the symbols meaning. A return is the end of one cycle and the beginning of another, and the length of the return is dependent on the proximity of the planet as it moves into a conjunction and to the exact return, which forms a chart, from the degree and minute the planet is in the natal chart. Now, that can be really, really confusing when you're just learning astrology. And here's what I'm going to say about that. You don't need to know about returns as a beginning astrology student because it's not beginning astrology. I will argue it's not really intermediate astrology until you're further into your intermediate studies. Okay. I know it's fascinating and it sounds sexy and it looks sexy, but it's unnecessary. You know, people, and I hear it and I feel it. You guys have to remember, I'm really, really intuitive. And I can hear the need to be special or the need to have a good year or have something good happen. And that's the other reason we want to be nitpicky about nomenclature, how we talk about astrology. Can you tell I'm getting ready to teach classes? That's right. I may add in a few more classes. I don't know. We've had quite a few people interested in natal chart foundations. It starts May 20th. It's not working in everybody's schedule, so I might get one starting in the summer because they're 12 weeks. This is, you know, solid live teaching. It's not just recorded videos. I could do that, and I have done that. It's not as juicy as getting people into understanding it all. There will be supplementary videos. There will be things you have to study. This is not a just lecture. There's some real study that goes into this. But it's really important to understand that just because you can regurgitate terms doesn't mean you understand it all the way. Okay? And I'm not dissing you, and I'm not saying that you're not smart. Not at all. We only know what we know. And so that, and I'll tell you straight out, when I was a young astrologer and I just started reading professionally a couple of years before I went to my first conference, I was so disappointed when I went to the conference because my instructors had really forced me to be able to argue my points and be able to explain my interpretations because they all saw in me the gift of communication. So they wanted me to really focus on communicating the chart. And I was feeling kind of lonely in my astrology practice. Yeah, I had my mentors and people online I could talk to, but I really wanted to talk to people, in person. So I went to this conference, and there were a whole bunch of people there, and we'd start talking, and people would be like, "Oh, did you know Saturn is in Aries?" Because Saturn was it was in Gemini at the time. Did you know Saturn's in Gemini? And yeah, Saturn's in Gemini. You know what that means? I'd be like, well, yes. And I'd start talking about it. They'd be like, oh. because they didn't know what it meant. They just would be like, oh, Saturn's in Gemini. Saturn is square this. And they'd be like, oh, it's square that. But they didn't talk about what that actually meant, right? I was really bummed. So, it really bummed me out that people couldn't just talk about it. All the teachers I studied with could talk about it, talk about what things meant. Even here on the podcast, there'll be people who say, Laurie rambles. I don't like this. I want to learn. Why is Laurie rambling? And except you're not listening. Everything I talk about is relevant to the week's astrology. And if you're listening, you'll hear the key words in astrology, And also, if you want to learn from me, this is a great beginning space, especially if a class doesn't fit into your schedule or your budget. I get it. But if you're just wanting to glean knowledge, take a class. I'm a fire hose, and those are very organized. This is a podcast. It's important not to just regurgitate information. It's important to ask questions and to read good books. Okay. I don't refer people out to books. I've got beginning guides, and it's funny because people will race through those and not realize they're meant as living references. You can go back to them time and time again. And it's important. And honestly, the first thing you can do when you're studying astrology, memorize your glyphs. It's your ABCs. Memorize your glyphs. You learned it as a kid. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. They go in order. That was the zodiac in order. The Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. No, I'm not adding in all the other stuff. Just learn that. Learn what those are. Be able to identify it. Because if you can't identify it looking at a chart, and you have to keep looking back and forth. Ooh, what's this? You're not going to develop the linguistic ability to translate that information fluidly. And then it's no better than taking an online personality test. Which chocolate chip cookie am I? Okay. Whereas they can be fun, it's not giving you the keys to unlocking yourself. So, I don't care if you study with me or you take a class with somebody else, but study it. Now, where I'm getting concerned is there's people teaching classes that are like, oh, orbs don't matter. We can use a 15-degree orb because the Greeks said it was okay. I'm like, again, I don't know. The Greeks drank out of lead cups and pipes and put belladonna in their eyes and, killed Socrates for corrupting the youth and married siblings. I don't know that I found it, worked with patriarchy, embedded it in Western culture. Okay. You can't use that as the basis of your argument and have it be an academic or valid argument. So it isn't that there isn't useful information that came out of Project Hindsight. It's a fascinating academic study. Fascinating. And that's what it was meant to be. Okay. What happened is there were people who said, oh, the math is hard when we look at Placidus or when we're studying the intricacies of modern astrological process. And this is easier. And easy isn't always better. Okay. So that's just my 2 cents. I still love reading through the information that came out of Project Hindsight. I love the concepts. It was a fascinating astrological foray into understanding the history of this wonderful subject that I've dedicated my life to. But I don't hear a lot of good arguments other than it's original. It's like, okay. There's better arguments. And I love a good argument. So take your time. and learn. And again, if you're a patron, you get my astro guides. Use those, refer to those. I'm making up flashcards right now for everybody in the Natal Chart Foundations class to be able to print out or, copy onto, 3x5 inch cards for themselves, but flashcard study cards to help make it a little more tactile. That's something I did for myself as a young student. So remember, I covered a lot of ground here, so you might want to just remember this is the spot where we talked about Mercury retrograde, about returns, understanding your studies, and how we talk about astrology, and we'll do more of that. And of course, I'll be answering questions from patrons at the end of the podcast in the Q&A section. So if you're a patron, don't forget to ask your questions in there. I'm glad to answer them here on the podcast. What this music means. It's time for my favorite part of the podcast. It is time for patron shoutouts. Without patrons, there is no Awake Space Astrology podcast. So if you run into a patron on a live stream or you want to just leave a comment here on the podcast, just say thank you to them. Patrons give pledges monthly to support the Awake Space Astrology podcast. They submit questions and they do things like leave timestamps on the YouTube videos. And we have a wonderful Discord with a community that connects. I am really, really amazed at the support, and not just for me, but for everybody in there. If somebody has a big life change or is going through something, there's a space for them to find their community and find people who have like interests. Everything from gardening and cooking to music and humor and, and I'm talking comedy. There's some pretty funny stuff in there. Current events. It's all astrologically related because astrology reflects life. And the one thing I can guarantee you moving forward into the future, for the foreseeable future, the next 20 years, what we have to do is reshape how we build community and understand that it is like hearts, not like minds, that build the future. And this is just one small effort to help in that process, and it packs a wallop. So I'm going to name the patrons, the newest patrons, and give them a big shout out. And then I have a few notes for you guys. I've got some interesting stuff coming up for patrons, but also about some patrons. So hold tight. All right, we've got Lizzie, Caitlin, Susan, Hazel, James, Jerica, Juti, Sarah, Sam, Electra, Susan, Nikki, Simone, Andrea, Radine, Sherry, Polly, Reba, Kyle, Danny, Kendall, Shannon, Tosha, Mugwort and Moon Podcast, Charlie Fox, Chloe, Verena, Krista, Rosina, Natalie, Michelle, Dominic, and Kaya. Thank you so much. Now, I'll probably mention this a little bit because I know people forward through this part because I'm naming names and you're like, I want to get to the good stuff. But this is the good stuff, guys. This is the good stuff. So I want to give a big shout out to Jen, who is the host of the Gemini Baby podcast. She gave a beautiful shout out to me as an astrologer. And in her last reading, back in March, one of the first things I said is, you're starting a podcast, right? Because the timing is perfect. And she was like, oh my gosh, this is like the universe just driving me to it. Anyway, it was an absolutely gorgeous shout out. It was about 20 minutes long. And she was like, I apologize for fangirling. I'm like, I'm not going to say no to that. So you can listen to the Gemini Baby podcast. And Jen is a music professional. She worked in the music industry, and she's trying to reinvent that, and she's sharing her journey on her own podcast. Couple of more shout outs. Patron Tracy St. Croix is an evidential medium. Yes, I hang out with mediums and tarot readers and all sorts of cool people. Tracy can go live on TikTok, and I was able to help boost some of her views in this weekend. Actually, I was just hastily trying to get stuff done on Saturday, but she went live. I caught it and I went live with her. Make sure you follow Tracy St. Croix on TikTok because she is an amazing and very accurate psychic. I don't hang out with slouches, guys. I love Carrie Wilson. I go to Carrie Wilson for a variety of things. I go to Tracy as well. They're both phenomenal in their own ways. You want to hang out with those guys. They are beautiful people and very, very professional with high ethics. And you know how much I hammer ethics, right? Let's see, I had somebody else. Oh, I want to give a big celebratory shout out to Maverick. They are winding up grad school. Yahoo! That is exciting. And they were very helpful with YouTube. Big shout out to Shay. Shay has timestamped some of my videos, and I adore Shay. Thank you. On YouTube. She's done that. And then Andrew taught me how to do the timestamps manually. Big thank you. I can add those now to other videos that I get up on the YouTube channel. It takes a village, people. It takes a village. I want to also give huge thanks to the mods. Kathy, who is Sister Luck, is one of the hostesses with the mostesses on the Discord. Shane is very helpful at pointing people in the right direction and sharing some of those beautiful, deep, intuitive insights of his. And then, of course, that's always the astrologers, who I don't refer to pancakes anymore because they are all grown-up astrologers. They're going to be starting to study transits as far as readings go. They're well-versed in transits, but reading for clients is another story. So they're going to start that part of their mentorship soon. Big shout out to Mackenzie, who's just phenomenal and deep. She's definitely got the makings of a spiritual and transformational coach and teacher. We've got Casey, who has this amazing ability to just kind of hold space and see people right into the core of who they are, draw them out of themselves. Jennifer, who is another one who just really kind of hold space for the essence of the person and kind of nurture them through the reading, offers a lot of resources, especially when it comes to neuroscience and practical ways of harnessing their talents. And Rita, who is so deeply fascinated by the human condition and helping people navigate to their path and their soul's purpose. She's another metaphysical mystic muse developing into her mastery, and just each one I get such great feedback for. So if you've been wanting a natal reading, you definitely want to book with them. If you're a patron, you get $75 off any reading this month. Also, the 2024 year ahead is now scheduled for June 30th of 2023. Yep, I don't normally do my year ahead so far out. Usually I wait till the end of the year. But in 2022, I did this. I'm doing it again in 2023. I'll do it in 2024 for 2025 as well. Because each year is its own blend of what is that? And so I want to give you guys a heads up. Patrons get 50% off. Patrons get 50% off the year ahead. And that's at all levels. Our levels begin at $5 a month and go up to $55. We have the Planet of the Month and Living by Luna essentially are the same thing. I need to change the tier information. I can't merge the tiers. But both of those tiers get all of it. Mystery School is a community-driven learning process that helps you align into your highest self. It is a self-actualization program, because you are the mystery and you are the magic, and it is something I designed years ago to help people walk through the journey of self-actualization. It's an ever-unfolding process. It's very guided. I'm present through the videos. I will be making new ones soon. And yes, you will learn a little bit more of the mysticism as well, but I can guarantee you it's encoded in every single week's program that you use as a student of the mystery school. You got to be in that Discord to get the most of it. All right, get the most out of everything. You got to be in the various Discords, especially in the mystery school. That one we communicate in there, not in the Patreon. And so you really want to be there if you're in the mystery school tier. Really important. I know it can be a little difficult to learn how to use Discord. It took me a minute. Just click around, guys. You can't break it. Alrighty. What's up next? What is up next? Got all kinds of classes coming up. I do. We've got the Natal Chart Foundations begins May 20th. And then, and I'll offer that maybe again this year. I don't have any dates planned, but I'll probably offer it again later on. Usually I teach this once a year in some way, shape, or form, but we're getting down to brass tacks. After teaching large groups of people over the last couple of years, I've really begun to see where the gaps are and where I can help fill those gaps so people have a really strong, solid astrological education. And that's important. It's important. It helps you understand you, and that's my goal. My goal is not to be, arrogant and superior, be like, you're wrong. It's to give you a strong foundation so you can really unpack and deconstruct the things that are in your way, so you're no longer an agent of oppression against yourself. Then giving you the keys to liberating yourself in the way that you designed yourself to be. All right. Yeah, that's where we're at. Did we get our laundry done yet? I gotta put my clothes in the dryer. All right, let's do some astrology Q&A. Patrons submit astrology questions to be answered here on the podcast. Sometimes I think I'm answering them again, but I don't expect everybody to listen to every single episode. But to the thousands of you who do, I want to say thank you. This was the other announcement I was looking for. We have well over 100,000 listens in total to the 3 seasons, and I'll say most of those 100,000 came in the last year and a half, because I was mostly just talking to myself the first year. I didn't expect anybody to really listen to me. And once I started getting an audience, I was like, well, maybe I should shape this into something. So, big thank you to all of you in the 68 countries that listen to us here at the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. It is an honor. And I don't care if there's just one listener in that country. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you. And I mean that. Because obviously I could just sit here and talk to myself. I have Venus and Gemini. I am a very good audience. But it's really nice to know that people are interested in learning more about astrology, hearing about the current events that can come up, and understand how you can actualize and be deliberate in your life and live meaningfully. That, to me, that is outstanding that you'd want to hear this. So thank you so much. So getting to the questions, I think I've answered this one before. This is from Alyssa. I heard you say that degree theory is incorrect. Does that mean you don't use decans? Decans are actual astrology. That has nothing, degree theory may claim it, but degree theory is where they assign meaning to each of the degrees in a divinatory way. When they talk about the evil degrees, there's no such thing as an evil degree. Okay, there's not a good degree, there's not an angelic degree, there's not an evil degree. That when you assign morality to a number, that is a problem. Okay, that's superstition. Decans describe, those are the 10 degree spaces in a sign. So you have the first 10 degrees, the second 10 degrees, and the third 10 degrees. And what those talk about is the maturity of the energy. Okay. Now, some people use planetary rulerships for the decans. I like to use signs because I think signs are more descriptive linguistically. And of course, a sign is ruled by a planet. So the planet is there de facto. So, yes, I do use decans. I don't sit and map them out like I did as a young astrologer. It's kind of just encoded into the strangeness that is my brain anymore. I've been getting onto podcasts as a guest. In fact, I have one coming up on Tuesday that I'll be on. And one of those was with a really wonderful lady who's an intuitive. When I get the emails saying that these podcasts are going to go live with my interviews, of course I'll give a shout out here on the podcast to them and sing it high and low of where I've been a guest on. But this particular lady is very intuitive and very psychic, and she took a peek at my brain as as I was talking about astrology, and I said, I often want to show people how my mind works, and she goes, "Oh no, I'm looking." And I was like, oh my God, somebody can see inside my brain. It's so cool because it's a thing. So I don't map them out as I will teach students how to map them out. But it's part of my thinking. Let's put it that way. So, but yeah, decans are a traditional part of astrology, as are anaretic degrees, the 0 degree, the 15 degree, and the 29th degree. They mark the maturity in the signs. So that's always a good question to answer. Moving on. Let's see, what else do I got here? I'm gonna jump ahead. I kind of do these randomly. Miranda, can I talk more about composite charts in synastry? So synastry is about relationship. It's not just relationships in a romantic sense. It's any kind. So like the parent-child readings that I do, that's synastry. When I do business teams, okay, whether it's 4 or 5 people, 10 people, that can be synastric. A composite chart is where, and there's a couple of different ways to do it. I like midpoint composites, and that is where 2 charts are blended and the midpoints are put together. And this shows the energy of that relationship itself. Okay, the focus of that relationship itself. They should not be looked at standalone. Reading synastry requires multiple charts. You want to do one party on the inside, one party on the outside of the wheel to see that perspective, and then you switch it, and then composites play a role. I find that people just beginning in astrology kind of jump into synastry a little too fast without all of the information. Again, astrology is not dot to dots, and it's not simple. Synastry is something I would hold at the end of an intermediate level study. I would not begin it in the beginning. You need to understand natal astrology very thoroughly before any kind of synastry, let alone composites, makes sense. Because remember, again, it's not just about grabbing a book. And there are some really fine books, Robert Hand, Robert Pelletier. The language is going to be outdated, The language is going to be outdated because concepts change, culture changes, social ideals change, and how we use language changes. And so you can't just sit with a cookbook, and that's what all astrologers call it, even the people who wrote them, okay? You can't just sit with a cookbook and be an expert. You've got to study the matter and learn it. So I would get really, really good at understanding my natal chart. I also think people, because they look for what they think they're missing in themselves in relationship, they're looking for somebody else's planets to plug the holes. And that is just going to be a life lesson. Okay. That is just, trust me on that one. Okay. So composites are a combination of 2 or more charts. Alrighty, what else have we got? Let's see. Let's see. I'm 40. I've never had my chart read, and this is from Allison. I'm interested in booking a session. I wonder if it's best to start with a natal reading. I'm also considering career and life planning session because I'm having to make some big, unexpected career changes right now. Where do you recommend I start? I can only afford one right now. Allison, if you've never had a reading, you want a natal reading. Okay. Because you can't make those decisions that you're looking for. And this goes to everybody, but you can't make those decisions if you don't have a deep understanding of yourself. Now, a natal reading may not tell you everything, it will tell you everything about you if one of us does it, but it's not going to tell you any surprises. In fact, a lot of times people feel like they have permission to really be themselves. So we shouldn't surprise you with anything in a natal chart reading, but we might tell you things that you haven't talked about with other people. Okay. And I'm not talking about trauma. I'm talking about sometimes your heart's desire, something you keep locked away. I can't count the times I've done a natal reading for someone, and I just ask what people do for a living. I just do, because a lot of times people aren't aligned into their best path. And so I'll be like, oh, are you in real estate? And they'll be like, no, I do this. And I'd be like, are you happy doing whatever it is you're doing? And they'll be like, no, I hate it. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you're meant to be doing something like this. So always start with a natal reading if you haven't ever had a reading before, or if you haven't had an actual professional reading. And if you're really stuck at a crossroads, then, in a pinch, you can do an astro energies reading. I'm not going to do a full out career session, but I will give you pointers because I'm the one who does the consultations. Career life planning is more like long-term envisioning. But if you're stuck at a crossroads, astro energies is probably your best bet. Gosh, I wish I could talk to you guys about some of the stuff that's up on deck, but I cannot. I got some big stuff. I got some big stuff coming up. And I'm trying to tell myself what I tell clients. Don't look at it like it's big, okay? Because it's not. It's not as big as it feels, but it is. It's a big deal to me, right? It's a big deal to you. Let's see. I answered that one last week. I'm just looking for questions. Let's see. What have we got? Oh, I think I answered this one before, but I think I'm going to touch on it again, especially this week. Alyssa asks, can you please talk about knowing the difference between intuition and anxiety/trauma-based fear? Yeah. And I get all of it. So when you get that pit of your stomach, or your throat tightens up, or your chest gets tight, that's anxiety or trauma-based fear. Okay. It's also your gut instinct. We have instinct too. Now, if you're a patron, you have access to the guide to instinct and intuition. Okay, where I explain the differences. All right, and you might have read through it again. I might do that one as an audio file because we have members who are low vision or visually challenged and they need some audio. So I think I might read through that, and that may help out. Intuition has no feeling to it. It's just an impulse or a thought. Whereas instinct will have a feeling to it. You'll feel the fear, So if you've ever walked down a road and you just felt like you were in the wrong place, or you walked into a building and you're like, the hair on the back of your neck stands up, or you get just a gut clenching fear, like, this is not the right place, or you're with somebody and you're like, ooh, danger, danger. That is instinct. Okay. Now, it can also happen, speaking of trauma. So if, and I'm only laughing because I'm thinking of myself. So my current boyfriend is very loving and very supportive, and I have not always had that in my life. Okay, I've lived a life. Let's put it this way. It's been interesting. It ain't been easy, but it's been interesting. And so he is unwavering in his affection. He is unwavering. It doesn't change. It doesn't go away. It doesn't give up. It's just solid. It's there. And I've been the one dancing around it. Okay. And there was a point in time about 2.5 years ago. Actually, 2 years ago, because we got back together 2 years ago, because I broke up with him before that. Yes, I did. There were good reasons for it, though, and it was important. But we came back together 2 years ago. And, I kept getting these moments of freakouts. Like, you guys wouldn't even recognize me because, I wasn't myself that I am right now. I would, like, literally flip out. I would just be sure that he wasn't going to be around. Call it an anxious attachment style. And there would just be this panic there. And so I would take that as, oh, this isn't a good relationship. But what it was is, here's a loving, stable relationship that I wasn't used to having, And so it was just old stuff that needed to be cleaned up, Like, oh, there it is. There it is. So that's a trauma-based reaction because he felt unfamiliar. It wasn't normal to me. It wasn't a sleazeball or scumbag or somebody trying to manipulate or possess. It's somebody who doesn't try to tell me what to do. Somebody who says, oh, that's what you want to do? Okay, cool. It's your life. You need to do what is best for you. I'm like, why aren't you trying to tell me what to do? Well, because he loves me. And so I get that. Intuition is what I would feel into to get past the anxiety. I'd be like, now when I really feel into it, where's the threat? There wasn't any. So that's something to remember. Now, another way intuition can come is you just get an impulse. You'll be like, hey, I really feel like going into town today. And you see something really cool on the way. Maybe you get a bunch of signs and symbols from the universe, or maybe you hear your favorite music and that puts you in a good mood, and then you meet somebody and everything works out. And that's pretty cool. So thank you, Alyssa. That is very cool. By the way, you submitted this at 11:33 p.m. on the 5th of May. Hope you listen in. Let's see. Okay, Sarah J asked, does astrology ever change depending on location, particularly hemisphere? I've heard you say that eclipses only have an impact where it's visible. Are there other similar rules of thumb about how transits are impacted by location, or whether it's night or day, or does the transit have the same impact on the entire globe? That's a really good question, Sarah. Okay, so the thing about eclipses is because it's about visibility, because it's the luminaries. Okay, when it comes to transits, they're global. Now, what is the chart in the location? Okay, that's going to tell us what area of life is being impacted. Okay, what part of the political spectrum is being impacted, what part of the economy is being impacted, or is it one place it's going to be an economic matter and another place it's not. So there's various, that's mundane astrology. So transits are global. In the case of an eclipse, it's about visibility because they're not always visible in a wide range. Okay, and it's the luminaries, right? So they only have a malefic impact if it's visible. Otherwise, you treat it like a new or full moon. Good questions, guys. I love this. Okay, I'm gonna do one more. Let's see what else I got. You guys, there's hundreds of you, and there are not hundreds of questions. I want questions. Let's see, Katja. What kinds of things might you expect from your Venus return? What if Venus retrogrades back to the sign degree of your Venus return? Good question, Katja. All right, so a Venus return is going to show, first of all, it becomes a chart, and the chart we want to look at is the final return. So sometimes Venus goes forward, retrogrades back, and then goes forward again. It's on that last forward return that we want the chart, okay? You're going to be working towards that stuff, okay? And what stuff? Your values. how you draw things to you. I just had my Venus return. And it was in the 6th house. And I was like, how surprising. How surprising. I'm going to be working. You'd better work, girl. So my work in the world is going to draw what benefits me most. Okay, that's a very simple answer on a return. Again, returns are more advanced intermediate astrology. Okay, and there's not a lot written about them. And you want to know why? It's a real simple reason. It's astrologers' bread and butter. That's why. We don't write a lot about this stuff. We teach our students, and not even always in classes. Sometimes we just teach our students, and they'll be, what you tend to read about returns is just the kind of the tip of the iceberg. But we will teach advanced students who are very close to us, who we want to carry forth our legacy. That's kind of the reason. There are people who teach it, but I find that the deep stuff doesn't get taught. Because it is our bread and butter. This is, is that gatekeeping? Yes, it is. It is, because we put our lives into the study. But yeah, so you want to look at the last return, always, any return. The final return sets the chart for the cycle that you're looking at. And in Venus's case, it's about a year. So I just had my Venus return this year. I'll have it again in April of 2024. I think, or 2025. I gotta look. It's gotta be 2025. Can't be 2024. Anyway, that's why we use software. I can't memorize everything. Let's see. All right. Okay, Denise. So your question is I'm not going to read out all of your interceptions, Denise, because that's effectively asking for a reading. So your 1st and 7th house are intercepted, and your 11th and 5th are intercepted. Okay. That would be correct. So your 1st and 7th and your 5th and 11th are intercepted. How do they play a role in the chart? Well, this may have been before I did the video on interceptions, but there is a video on YouTube all about interceptions. They play a role. You don't need to worry about whether there's planets or no planets. The houses each have a meaning. And first house is all about yourself, and it's hard when you have an intercepted first house. So that means you weren't really allowed to be self-expressive in the way you needed to be when you were young, which makes it hard to be in authentic relationships, the 7th house, because if you've never been allowed to express yourself, how do you know how to work in relationship with other people? Likewise, the 5th house is about creative self-expression, and the 11th house is about collaboration. And so it's more like maybe there were some controlling people in your life, or maybe there was somebody who needed a lot of attention and you were kind of left to your own devices. And so you're not doomed. It just means transits open these things up. Lucky you, you're going to have Venus in that 1st house for a whole long time this year, because it's going to go retrograde and then go forward. If you want to know more about interceptions, that's anybody, you can go to my YouTube channel and watch the video about them where I explained interceptions. Interceptions aren't exactly beginning astrology. I'm going to touch on it I'm touching on that in intermediate. That's right. I'm just hinting at retrograde planets because the question always comes up in natal astrology. So we'll touch on retrograde planets and what they kind of mean in a birth chart. Interceptions and retrogrades we're doing in intermediate astrology that starts June 3rd. That's an invitation only or an application only class. So let's see. And if you applied, you got your emails for those of you who were moving forward. If you didn't, Then you got one about natal chart foundations. And if you didn't get all of that, let me know. We got Kiki. My best friend got engaged on the 10th of May. Is that a bad omen? They got they got engaged during Mercury retrograde? Nope. Nope, Kiki. That is not a bad omen. In fact, I don't like omens. Mercury retrograde, they could have been, in fact, whoever popped the question could have been wanting to do it for a while, or it's just a resolution to an outstanding situation. So, Kiki, I think it'll be fine. I think it will be fine. So that's a good question, but no, it's not a bad omen. You can sign a lease. You can, I've signed a lease for an apartment during a retrograde because I needed a place. It resolved an issue for me. I've bought a new car during a retrograde because I literally needed a car. That was a whole saga. It resolved. So Mercury retrograde does not mean the engagement will not last. And if you have concerns about the relationship itself, then just be prepared to support your friend. Oh, Mama AJ, can you explain the difference between when a planet goes stationary and when it goes direct? Are they the same thing or are they different? They are different. They are not the same thing, Mama AJ. And I talked about the process of Mercury retrograde or any planetary retrograde. A planet stations. That means it looks like it stops. And then it goes into a direction, whether it's going direct, which is forward, or retrograde. So the station happens and then it's in direct motion. So it stations direct though. So think about it. If you're marching and 1, 2, 3, 4, you stop, that would be station, and you turn on your heel. That shows the direction you're going to be going. So I hope that helped. What good questions, everybody. Questions are my crack. So I need you guys to ask me questions. I need you guys to ask me questions for me to answer. So if you're a patron, fill out the Google form, I look so forward to your questions. You ask such good ones. So, come into the Discord if you're not in the Discord, if you're a patron. This is where the action happens, guys. And I look forward to talking to you next week about the shenanigans we've survived this week. And if you're a patron, make sure you come in on Tuesday for the radio show where you can, we'll be on video too. It's a live streaming event, but you can call in if you're using an internet browser on a computer. And I'll get those instructions out to you again today, Monday, May 15th. All right. Thank you for listening to the Awake Space Astrology podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I look forward to talking to you next week.